It's 1965. A man in a suit sits down and writes a check. The check is for $6,500, about $50,000 today, going to three scientists at Harvard University. And what he's paying them to do will shape what you eat for the next 60 years. We're not going to tell you his name yet. First, some context. For most of human history, sugar barely existed in your diet. You got sweetness from fruit, maybe twice a year if you were lucky. Your brain rewarded that sweetness heavily. It meant calories. It meant survival. Fast forward to now. The average person eats about 17 teaspoons of added sugar a day. That reward system built for rare berries is now firing constantly. And for decades, you were told the real enemy on your plate was fat. Low-fat yogurt, low-fat cookies, low-fat everything. You probably bought some of it. Most people did. Here's the part nobody put on the label. When food companies pulled the fat out, the food tasted like cardboard, so they replaced it with something else. Sugar. An entire generation was taught to fear butter and trust sugar. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because of that check we mentioned. Let's go back to 1965. By the early 1960s, scientists were noticing something uncomfortable. Studies kept linking sugar, not fat, to heart disease. That was a massive problem because sugar was big business. The Sugar Research Foundation represented the entire American sugar industry, and its vice president had a plan. His name was John Hickson. Hickson didn't need to hide the truth forever. He just needed to bury it in noise. So in 1965, he reached out to Harvard's nutrition department. Three researchers took the deal: Frederick Stair, Mark Hegsted, and Robert McGandy. Stair ran the whole department. His word carried enormous weight. Their assignment had a code name: Project 226. Their job: write a review of the science on sugar, fat, and heart disease, and quietly steer the conclusion in a very specific direction. The sugar industry got to review drafts before publication. They picked which studies to include and which ones to leave out. Studies that blamed sugar for heart disease got quietly dismissed as weak. Studies that blamed fat sailed through without much scrutiny. In 1967, the review was published in one of the most respected medical journals in the world, the New England Journal of Medicine. Doctors everywhere read it, trusted it. Nowhere in that paper did it mention who paid for it. The disclosure rules that exist today simply didn't exist yet. So as far as the world knew, this was just neutral science. It wasn't neutral, it was paid for. But this is where it gets worse, because this paper didn't stay in a drawer. It shaped decades of official nutrition advice in the United States. One of the three researchers, Mark Hegsted, went on to help write federal dietary guidelines. In 1977, a Senate committee released the first ever dietary goals for America: eat less fat. That was the headline. Nobody said much about sugar. Food companies didn't need to be told twice. They reformulated thousands of products to cut fat, and to make up for the lost taste, they added sugar. A lot of it. Sugar consumption in America climbed for the next 2 decades. So did obesity. So did type 2 diabetes. You were told to be afraid of the wrong thing for a generation. And it wasn't only about burying the science. It was also about silencing people who disagreed. There was a British scientist who saw this coming. His name was John Yudkin. In 1972, Yudkin published a book. It had a blunt title: Pure, White, and Deadly. His argument was simple. Sugar, not fat, was the real driver of heart disease. The sugar industry did not appreciate this. Internal industry documents, uncovered decades later, show a coordinated response. One sugar industry memo referred to critiquing his work, line by line, in public. Yudkin was mocked at conferences, dismissed by colleagues who had industry ties. His career never recovered. His book faded into obscurity for 30 years. Meanwhile, the low-fat, high-sugar diet became the official recommendation of an entire country. For 30 years, this stayed buried. Then, in 2016, a researcher named Kristen Kearns found something in an old archive: boxes of Internal Sugar Research Foundation correspondence, untouched for decades. Letters between Hickson and the Harvard researchers. Draft after draft, Kearns, along with researchers Stanton Glantz and Laura Schmidt, published the findings in JAMA Internal Medicine. The story finally had a paper trail: the check, the names, the edits, all of it documented. 50 years after the original paper, the truth caught up with it. So let's go back to that man writing a check in 1965. His name was John Hickson, and he wasn't some rogue villain acting alone. He was doing exactly what his employer paid him to do: protect an industry by any means available. And it worked for half a century. Now let's talk about what sugar actually does inside your body and why this mattered so much. When you eat sugar, your liver processes it differently than other carbohydrates. In small amounts, this is completely fine. Your body evolved to handle some sugar. But in the amounts most people eat today, the liver gets overwhelmed. Excess sugar gets converted into fat. Some of it builds up around your liver itself. This is now linked to fatty liver disease in people who don't even drink alcohol. None of this was unknown in the 1960s. Some scientists suspected it even then. They just weren't the scientists whose papers got funded and published. This is the actual mechanism behind the whole story. It's not that the sugar industry invented fake science from nothing. It's that they funded real scientists to ask questions in a way that guaranteed a convenient answer. Now, which studies got funded, which got reviewed favorably, which got buried? That's not fraud in the crude sense. It's something quieter and more effective. This same playbook has shown up again and again in other industries since. Tobacco companies used it. Oil companies used it. It has a name now. Researchers call it manufacturing doubt. You don't have to win the argument. You just have to make the science look uncertain. Uncertainty is enough to delay regulation for decades. And decades is exactly how long the sugar industry needed. long enough for an entire food system to be rebuilt around cheap sugar, long enough for it to end up in bread, in pasta sauce, in salad dressing, foods that don't taste sweet at all but quietly contain added sugar anyway. By the time the truth came out in 2016, the habit was already built. You grew up inside the system this one funded study helped create. Your early food memories, your comfort foods, some of that was engineered. Not by fate, not by nature, by a marketing decision made in 1965. And here's the part that should actually bother you. The 3 Harvard researchers faced no real consequences. Frederick Stare kept leading Harvard's nutrition department for years afterward. Mark Hegsted kept shaping national nutrition policy. All 3 researchers had died before the 2016 investigation was published. No apology, no correction issued in their names, no retraction. The Sugar Association, successor to the old foundation, called it an old matter. They said current science supports a balanced diet. Technically true, carefully worded. Nobody went to prison. Nobody lost a license. Nobody paid anything back. The only real cost was paid by people who never knew this deal existed. People making food choices based on advice that was never actually neutral. So here's where this leaves you. Every time you felt like you lacked willpower around sugar, that might not be the full story. You were handed a food environment engineered, quite literally, by paid science. The guidelines that told you what to fear were never fully yours to trust. That doesn't mean nutrition science is fake. It means you have to ask who paid for it. Today, disclosure rules exist because of exactly what happened in 1967. Every reputable journal now requires researchers to declare industry funding. That rule exists because 3 men in the 1960s proved it was necessary. So the next time you see a headline, a study, a guideline, ask one simple question: who benefits if I believe this? It's not paranoia. It's just what an entire industry once counted on you never asking. Back in 1965, a man wrote a check that quietly rewrote what an entire country believed about food. You inherited that belief without ever seeing the check. Now you have. And that changes what you do with the next headline you read. Not because you should trust nothing, but because the truth, it turns out, is usually just sitting in a box somewhere, waiting for someone curious enough to open it. 50 years, one check, and an entire generation's plate.